But they will open, is it so? Let him come. Yeah, you are fine. Go ahead. Let him come, and now it's not.
No, you are online now.
Hmm?
You are online.
But that gallery view, ask him to come.
Yeah.
The gallery view, hold on.
I think.
You take gallery view, just show where it is.
Oh, okay. On the left.
Yeah.
Hari Om Swamiji.
Hari Om, yeah. Best, yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the continuation of the discussion on the foundational texts of Indian philosophy. This meeting will be recorded and it will be posted on YouTube. If you have missed any of the previous discussions, you may find it on YouTube. There would be a question and answer segment at the end of the discussion. So if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask. Please use the raise hand feature of Zoom in order to maintain the queue. If you are not speaking, please mute yourselves in order to minimize the disturbances. Thank you.
So, thank you, Prajwal.
Recording in progress.
Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avatara varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha Sruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram. So we are continuing our discussion on this well-known hymn from the Rigveda Samhita, Nasadeeya Suktam. As I mentioned at the very beginning of the session, this hymn got this name, Nasadeeya Suktam, from the words used at the very beginning of this hymn, that is, Na asat asit no sad asit. In the beginning there was neither existence nor its absence, nor non-existence. Now these are all contradictory terms when applied to the primordial mystery. It's called the beginning of creation. I mean, what was there before this world began? So the whole poetical work is trying to indicate one aspect, that is, this mystery has no real answer. So that's why this hymn concludes with a few questions. From where did this existence came? From where did this creation emerge? And who knows its mystery? And how do we know the mystery? And indirectly, without saying in so many words, it indicates that the whole theme is beyond question and beyond answer. Now remember, this is a deeply mysterious poem. It is not a regular piece of poetry that explains or describes something, the beauty of nature or something. It's an inquiry into the very fundamental questions of existence and creation. And finally, it ends with a question and implies that the question itself is meaningless because the theme is beyond question, the theme is beyond answer. I know this is a very difficult thing to understand. Now, the point is, a higher poem, a higher mystical poetry is, especially the transcendental poetical works, they do not emerge from our brain. They do not necessarily explain a concept or an idea. Rather, this higher poetry is an expression of some of the deep feelings and emotional emotional forces that are working within our mind. It ultimately says that what we are seeking is beyond description, beyond answer, beyond question. So that anyway, so it's, in fact, I tell you, it is not like Purusha Suktam which has got a definite theme, a structure and all that. But here it is, what we find is, in these words, the poet tries to tell you that creation and mystery are beyond our inquiry, beyond our description. But there is one interesting theme that is mentioned here, that is how this world, especially the phenomenal world, how different human beings, different living beings emerge and remain for some time, then get dissolved, and how they re-emerge. So that the mystery of this transmigratory cycle, that is explained here. That we'll take up. Today's theme includes that discussion also. So now we'll come to the work proper. So as I mentioned, there was no death. Na mrityurasid, amudam na tarhi. So there was neither death nor deathlessness. Na ratriya anna asid prakeda. Again, there was no light, and also light in the sense there was no day, and therefore there was no night. But the whole thing was enveloped in some kind of a darkness, and that darkness is the unmanifest, the inexpressible, the invisible. And then there was no month, no year, no seasons, nothing of the kind that we normally connect with in our everyday empirical life. And there was one reality, the Brahman, which remained in his unmanifest or non-manifest state. This reality, this primordial being, which is in the nature of unmanifest, when it becomes manifest, then it becomes endowed with names and forms, and that's what we call creation. And again, this cosmos, remaining like this for maybe some billions of years, again get dissolved, and then there will be a long period of inactivity, and again there will be re-emergence of this world. And during this re-emergence, different living beings are reborn again. That process is also described here in the coming sections. Now we'll come to the third mantra, which we referred to earlier. Yeah. Tam asid tamasa gunnam agre prakedam sarilam sarvama idam tuchena abhihidam idasid tapas tan mahimana jayadaikam. So I'm going to read the commentary and explain this. So remember, of course, those of you who can get a copy of this hymn with transliteration in Roman letters with English translation. Any of you who are planning to study this, for your help, I am actually trying to put this in prose order. Remember, a piece of poem in Sanskrit tradition, Sanskrit language, Sanskrit literature, when you study a poetical work, you take a verse, you read carefully, then you put the entire verse in prose order. Prose order means, this, the one who does something and how he does it, everything is explained in a logical order. And after putting in prose order, you understand the meaning of each word, and then you derive a connected meaning, and then there is an interpretation. It's called, Padha, Padacheda, Anvaya, Anvayartha, and so on. These are all not part of our discussion now, but still it should be understood. So I'm going to put in prose order. So prose order is called Anvayam in classical studies. So Agre Tama Asid, what it means is, at the beginning. Beginning means before the world came into existence. Tama Asid. Tama means darkness. This darkness, this Tama, has got two implications. One, ignorance in the ordinary sense, or the unmanifest, the subtle unmanifest form of the cosmos. When it is unmanifest, there is no name, no form. When it becomes manifest, it gets endued with name and form. That's the idea behind. So, before the creation began, Agri Tamasit, everything was enveloped in a kind of darkness. The darkness in Vedantic language can mean Maya. So Maya is the instrument through which the unmanifest becomes manifest. The Vedanta philosophy, the absolute reality, when it is realized and experienced as the absolute reality, which is possible only in Samadhi, then it is understood in its true form. But the same absolute reality exists in the form of everything that we see around. I should try to explain this in simple language. It's a bit complex language. Try to explain. In Vedanta, Sarvam Khalu Idam Brahma. Everything is Brahman. Everything is Atman. Everything is the same absolute reality. This is an important statement. Now, the question arises, does it mean that the trees and mountains and valleys, oceans, and all that we see, all the empirical things, they're all Brahman? You cannot say the tree is Brahman or ocean is Brahman. Brahman here means the all-pervading divine spirit, divine reality. But we cannot say that trees and mountains and valleys, a tree and a table that's in front of you are all Brahman. No. But that Brahman is appearing to be or appearing to have become this world. Not really becoming, appearing to have become this world. And then you see this empirical universe. When through practice of spiritual disciplines you become a Brahmajnani, a knower of Brahman, a liberated soul, an enlightened person, then you live in this world, you will be seeing all this, but actually, even while living in this world, you are still experiencing the same supreme reality in this world, But everything is seen as Brahman behind. So what you see is the name and form. Remove name and form, then what is left out is Brahman. This idea behind. To give the analogy of the serpent, the snake and rope. When we mistake a rope for a snake in a dark room, then we don't see the rope, we see only the snake. When we bring light, then what we previously thought to be the snake is now understood to be the rope. So similarly, as a result of our spiritual disciplines, when we become spiritually enlightened, then you may live in this world, but you will still be experiencing your identity, your oneness with the entire universe, because you realize, you experience the presence of the divine within you, and you realize the presence of the divine within everyone. So even when you look at every a person or animal or anything, you cannot do any harm to anyone, because you feel, you experience the presence of the divine everywhere. You can find in Sri Ramakrishna's life, at the beginning of Sri Ramakrishna's spiritual practices, he was extremely meticulous in performing all the rituals. He used to pluck flowers from the garden, bilwa leaves, all those things he used to pluck from the garden, do puja with great attention and with great devotion. But because of his long years of meditation and spiritual disciplines, he eventually felt that he need not go to the temple to feel the presence of the divine. He can feel the presence of the divine even when he is not in the temple. He feels the presence of the divine when he is not doing puja. Finally, it became impossible for him even to pluck flowers from the garden, because he realized even the flowers that he was supposed to pluck from the garden, those flowers also are non-different from Brahman. But again, this is a state of spiritual experience. This may not remain the same condition for long, but this is the highest state of spiritual experience. Means you feel your spiritual unity and oneness with the entire creation. So this unity and oneness we do not experience because of Maya. So how does Maya interfere? When you see everything through the glasses, prism of name and space, Maya enters. When you break out of this Maya or ignorance and become enlightened, then you see everything as one supreme reality. Again, spiritual teachers who attain this state of liberation or enlightenment do not remain in that state all the time. They also normally eat food and the normal human requirements they will have. But still, they will have in their mind the feeling that everything is one supreme reality. So here, coming back to this particular hymn, Agretama Asid. Sushte prak atmatatvasya avaragatvat mayaprasamyam bhavarupa ajñādatama yat tadasid. So, at the beginning, the whole universe appeared to be enveloped in darkness of Maya. So, what is Maya? Name and form. But it is in unmanifest state. This becomes manifest when it assumes name and form. And this unmanifest becoming manifest by assuming name and form is called srishti or projection, what we now English call creation in Vedantic language. As I mentioned earlier, creation is nothing but gold becoming ornaments, different ornaments, or mud or soil becoming different mud pots, mud pans, and so on. And dissolution means all this going back to the state of gold or going back to the state of soil. So this emergence, then remaining in that state of existence for in the context of the world, universe, maybe billions of years, and again going back and re-emergence, this happens through cycles. Now the question arises, how do different living beings, human beings, how do they re-emerge? So Vedanta and Vedic philosophy, Hindu philosophy gives some very important descriptions in this context. Suppose we do a lot of good things in this life or for several life cycles, and we accumulate a lot of good samskaras, good impressions, good tendencies. And then suppose the universe, let's say in modern times, if you said you in some kind of a terrible cataclysmic war or destruction, and all living beings they're wiped out, everything goes away. And maybe after maybe in some millions of years, this earth itself may lose its present nature. I can give a reference. I want to refer to one important article that appeared in Scientific American several years ago, at least maybe 15 years ago, long before I came to this country. This is an article in Scientific American. It is based on some kind of hypothetical speculations, which will be very important for us to understand Nasadeeya Suktam. It begins like this. Suppose one day the whole humanity disappears from New York, Manhattan. That is given. This article you can perhaps get back if you. I don't remember the exact year of his publication. Suppose, just hypothetically, that article develops a hypothesis. Suppose one day, due to some cataclysmic, maybe some meteor things or something that descends on this earth, and the whole earth becomes uninhabitable, entire creation, all living beings get wiped out. So New York is given as an example, have Manhattan in that article. Suppose all human beings become non-functional, they disappear. What will happen? During the first 1 or 2 years, all the plumbing systems, all the electrical systems, all these things will be completely disturbed, and nothing will happen. Perhaps water may flood into the streets, and the city can be practically inhabitable. And after 10 years or 15 years, again, further damage. Then it goes on, hypothetically goes on imagining, after 1 million years, what will be the state of this world? Then the picture is given, it will be almost like a star, some kind of something that we see from a distance, some like gaseous form, which is not like the earth in which we live today. It will be in the shape of a gaseous form or something. Now Vedanta tells you it can remain like that. After some billions of years, again creation will begin. Now the question arises. Now here the article ends. Now coming back to our subject. Suppose this world, this humanity, this cosmos disappears, and after some billions of years it re-emerges. What happens to human beings, living beings? So Vedanta tells you that the samskaras, the tendencies, the impressions left behind by your actions and thoughts, they remain in seed form during the intervening period. Finally, when the universe re-emerges, all of us, all living beings will be recreated, will re-emerge. And whatever samskaras we have already accumulated in this life, with those samskaras and tendencies, we will be reborn again. So this cyclic rotation, because cyclicism. I mean, existence or creation, existence, dissolution, and again re-emergence of creation. This continues in the infinite. Now this process doesn't take place within time, because the very concept of time that we have today is built upon the shaky foundation, how much time the earth takes to go around the sun, like that. This, of course, it is just based on some of the peculiarities, special characteristics of the earth. That's the basis of our time concept. But here this happens in a state where it's beyond time, beyond causation, beyond space. In fact, that is what this hymn is referring to. So, Sistehi Prak Atmatattvasya Avaragatvat Maya Prasamyam Bhavarupa Jnatatama Yat Tad Asit. So, before creation, everything was in an enveloped form. This is how Nasadeeya Suktam approaches the subject of creation, existence, dissolution, and again re-emergence. Creation, I am using the word for want of a better term in English, but what in Vedanta it implies is it is called projection. Projection. Creation can imply the transition from a state of non-existence into a state of existence. A pot is created from a state where it did not exist. So from a state of its absence, it emerges into a state of its presence. That is creation. But here it is not creation from something, rather it is projection. Projection in time and space, that is creation. That's what creation implies in Vedanta. Tena tamasa gulham. Here it says everything is samvrutam, aprakedam, aprajnayamanam, namarupabhyam vispashtam, najnayamanam. So it was not combined with, it was not manifesting with name and form. When it begins to manifest with name and form, then creation begins. So when I use the word creation, remember it is not in the same sense in which the word creation is used in the Abrahamic tradition. Here creation, actually what I am implying is projection, this idea behind. Idam sarvam salilam aha drishyamanam sagalam jagat yatha salilam shirena vibhaga pannam neeram durvijnanam datha tamasa vibhago pannam jagat na shakya vijnanam asir. Of course, the poet is using an allegory here, a comparison. But he says, for example, milk and water. Milk and water, they are mixed, so you cannot tell milk from water. They are indistinguishable. So they become one, milk and water. Like that, everything was enveloped in darkness or Maya. That's what it means here. Tuchena, tuchakalpanena, asamantas, sadasad vilakshanaena, bhavarupena, ajnanena, abhu api hidam yad asit ekam, so samandad achaditam bhuva eki bhudam tamasa vibhagadam prajnam. So, nothing could be clearly understood. You cannot clearly distinguish one object from the other. That's a real meaning. That's the meaning of eki bhudam. I mean, they become one. So this primordial darkness is a symbol of the first moment. It's the first moment that happens in this progress towards manifestation of the universe. But that is called symbol of the first moment. So this primordial darkness is the beginning. It is what should have existed before this creation started. Again, I have to mention to you, Nasadeeya Suktam doesn't really explain anything. It ends with some questions, and these questions are very important. In fact, the poet concludes his work with some questions. So you find it comes in the sixth mantra. Kaha iyam visustihi. That's that is in the seventh mantra. But the question begins, ko adhava idamahi iha pravochat. So, kahava iha pravochat. So, in this universe, in this world, what was the material cause from which this world was created? And what was the efficient cause? It's called nimitta karanam, upadana karanam in Vedantic language, or Vedic language, so to speak. This comes in the sixth mantra. And the seventh, last mantra, it says, yam visustihi. Kaha yam visustihi. Then ata ajada. Kuta ajada yam visustihi. From where did this creation emerge? These questions. And with these questions, the poem comes to an end. What does it mean? This world is beyond description in empirical sense. Just as the absolute reality is beyond description in empirical sense. Vedanta, Vedantic tradition, there are two important words that you heard, Brahman and Maya. So this philosophical idea should be kept in mind. Brahman is beyond description. Vacham agocharatvad. You cannot describe it because words cannot see that. That's a real literal meaning. Anirvachaniya surupatva. Many such statements are there. It is beyond description, beyond definition. Sarva pramana avatihi. It is beyond all tools of epistemology, all tools of knowledge. Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, Shabda, Arthavati, Anubhalavdi, etc. There are 10 tools, pramanas in Hindu tradition. But in Vedantic tradition there are altogether 6. Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, Shabda, Arthavati, Anubhalavdi. Means direct perception, inference, comparison that is analogy, then well-bred testimony, then presumption and negation. So these are the things. So Brahman, the absolute reality, which is the only eternal reality, is beyond description, beyond definition, beyond words, and beyond reach of any of the tools of knowledge. It is something that can only be experienced as our own real inner being. The other word that you find in Vedanta is Maya or Mithya, interrelated. Maya also is indescribable. Mahat Buddha Anirvachaniya Rupa, Shankaracharya says in the Vivekachudamani. This Maya is a great mystery. Sannapya Sannapi Bhayat Megano, like Nasadeeya Suktam. Nasadasid, no sadasid in Nasadeeya Suktam. Sat na asid. So sanna sat so sanna sasanna ubhyatmigano bhinna pi abhyatmi ubhyatmigano sanga pi asanga pi ubhyatmigano makhat buddha anivachaniya rupa. It's neither existence, na sat na asat na existence. It is neither the same, neither or different. Like that, all possible descriptions in terms of is or is not, negative and affirmative, are used and says this Maya is beyond description. Now the point is, Maya is beyond description because it actually doesn't exist. So it is not Sat, not real. But at the same time, till we reach the highest spiritual enlightenment, we are all within Maya. So we cannot say it doesn't exist. So we cannot say it exists because the reason why we cannot say it exists is because once you get spiritually enlightened, Maya is no more there. Once we become spiritually enlightened for a Sri Ramakrishna or a Shankaracharya or any spiritually enlightened persons, they live in this world, but they are free from the clutches of Maya. They transcend Maya. So Maya really doesn't exist in the absolute sense because it disappears at one point of time. So it is not real in the absolute sense. But it is not unreal in the absolute sense because till we realize the supreme truth, spiritual enlightenment, we are all within Maya. So Maya is anirvachaniya, Brahman is also anirvachaniya. Brahman is anirvachaniya or indescribable because it cannot be explained or described because it beyond description, beyond explanation. So Brahman transcends explanation. Maya is also indescribable because it is not real in the absolute sense. It is not unreal in the absolute sense. It is real so long as we are within Maya. We understand that it is actually unreal only when we are out of it, when we are liberated from it. Now the point is that should be understood when we study this Nasadeeya Suktam from a Vedantic perspective. So Agre Tama Asid, in the beginning, so before creation, Srishtihi Prak, that's what Sayanacharya explains. Before Srishti, before projection, before creation, there was something which cannot be called real or unreal. Na asadasid, na sadasid. So what was it? It was Maya, the indescribable mystery. And how to emphasize this mysterious nature of it, not by saying it is mysterious, but by using language in a way that will confuse you. So you find is neither real nor unreal. It may appear to be a matter of confusion, but actually it is not. I mentioned this earlier when I described Purusha Suktam. Sometimes, in the Christian tradition, maybe the greatest philosopher, mystic was Meister Eckhart, who lived in 13th century Germany. He's a Dominican priest. He brought this apophatic tradition called negative theology, the idea that God cannot be actually described, that the God is beyond the known, beyond the very concept of knowledge. So you cannot even define God as Holy Trinity, either Father, Son, or Holy Ghost, or anything. Even to define God is an act of blasphemy according to him. So it's called negative theology. Of course, in Vedantic tradition, you can find in Brihadaranyaka, in Chandogya, and also in Mandukya. Nanta prakyam, the Bhish prakyam, the Bheda prakyam, na prakyam. You find a seventh mantra of Mandukya Upanishad, which I described many times in this context. So what it means is, this apophatic idea, the indescribable nature, the mystery of this universe is implied by the poet by asking the question, who understood this? Kuda iyam visishti, from where this creation came. Again, kaha ajada, who understood this, means it is beyond knowledge. So it is indescribable. This idea is for us to conclude. The poet doesn't say that, but poet gradually leads us to this realization. So you can find a poet, he doesn't say that, but if you follow his thoughts, you are bound to reach that conclusion. That's the power and force of this important poem. So you have to remember, it is not a poem from a modern Sanskrit literature. It belongs to Rigveda Samhita. That was a time long before, thousands of years before Sanskrit language got standardized as with certain definite rules, regulations of grammar and syntax and philology, such a matter. So then we come to the fourth mantra. Fourth mantra is important because it contains the well-known and the oft-quoted statement that is Sadobandhum asadi niravindan hridi pradeshya kavayo manisha. So the ancient sages, they went in search, they contemplated and meditated and thought, what is the ultimate cause? Srishtihi prak, what was there before Srishti, before creation? So, and then finally they realized that they cannot really explain it. When Kriti Pradishya Kavayo Manisha. So Kavi is a word used here. Kavi, its literal meaning is poet, but its metaphysical meaning is the one who sees the essence of things, the one who has insight into the essence of everything, the one who can realize the essence of everything. Such a person is called Kavihi. So, Kavayaha Mantradashtaraha, that is the definition by Shankaracharya. So, the fourth mantra, Kamaha Tadagre Samavartadati, Manaso Reda Prathamam Yadasit. So, Agre means Vikarajadasya Srishtihi Prak Avasthayam Parameshwarasya Manasi. So, here the poet posits a creator God in this particular. Of course, you remember, it is the commentary of Sayanacharya. So Sayanacharya lived in 13th, 14th century. So that means he was born maybe 4,000 years, 5,000 years after this mystical poetry was written. But so Sayana he tried to explain it in the language that people can normally understand. But if you go to the real original verse, the poet doesn't say anything about the Parameshwara, means one supreme God, like that. But we have to follow Sayana because Sayanacharya is the most reliable commentator because he wrote commentaries on all the four Vedas. He was the minister, he was a great statesman. He lived during the beginning of Vijayanagar Empire. He was a great scholar. He wrote commentaries on all four Vedas. So, Vikarajadasya Srishtihi Prak. So, before this world of names and forms was created, a thought came in the mind of God. That's a literal meaning. Again, you should not ask the question, there was no God here. So that's again the commentator's interpretation. So he's trying to explain it in some kind of a logical language that we can understand. Kamaha tadagre samavartadati. Kama, the word kama here, desire is the literal translation, but what it means is sankalpa and kama. The are different. Kama here means sankalpa. And sankalpa is not necessarily what we understand by the word desire. Sankalpa is a natural, involuntary thought that comes in our mind. That's called sankalpa. We don't plan, we don't make preparations for a sankalpa, but rather a thought suddenly emerges in our mind. So, before this world of names and forms emerged, a contemplative thought emerged in the heart of God. Kamaha tadagre samavartadati. Kamaha sam avartada. Sisruksha jata antakaranasya sambandhi vasana visheshena mayaya viline antakarane. Sarva prani antakaraneshu samavedam bhavinaha prapanchasya bijabhudam atide kalpe pranibhikritam. What I explained earlier. So, the Srishti creation is explained. So, a thought, a contemplative thought, sankalpa, emerged in the mind of the Lord. And what was that? What was that sankalpa? What was the thought? a desire in the form of an urge to create this universe. And before this, in the previous mantra, this is mentioned as tapaha, tapastan mahina jayataikam. Abhu abhidam yet asid ekam tat tapasaha srastavya paryalojana rupasya dhyanasya mahina jayata. So, this thought took the form of a tapa. Tapa is deep, involuntary contemplation that naturally comes to our mind. And I can tell you that all great artistic creations are the products of this process, this sankalpa. What is sankalpa? Sankalpa is a deep, intense thought process that comes involuntarily, without any effort. You can find all great paintings, Da Vinci or Raphael or anyone you take, great writings like Dostoevsky or Tolstoy, any creative writings, even short story like Anton Chekhov, or great music, Beethoven, anyone. Or in Indian context, there were many saintly musicians who lived very saintly lives. So, great men like Tyagaraja and others, they just sang as they walked. Shankaracharya wrote what can be called 65 of the most beautiful, most intensely devotional poetical pieces in Sanskrit language. 65, so 66. So, and as he walked, as he stood in front of a temple, as he prayed, the thought came and outpoured this great music. That is true also for creative writers. If you plan, make long preparation to write a piece of poetry, that poetry won't be worth reading. Suppose you keep on your table a huge bundle of papers. I am going to write a good essay. I am going to write a good novel. You cannot write anything worth reading. But when the thought comes to you, when a thought possesses you, it comes to you uninvited, an urge to do something. It may be to paint a picture, to compose a great classical music. Many in India you find many such Tyagaraja, Swami Dikshidhar, Purandaradasa, great men. They went, they walked, sometimes begging. They lived only for worshipping the Lord, and in their movements, these poetical outpourings happened. It is an example of this sankalpa. So that is a sankalpa that emerged in the mind of Creator. So that's why it is said, Kamastadagre samavartadadi manaso reda prathamam yadasid. Agre kama sam avartada manasati. Vikarajatasya sistehe prag avasthayam parameshwarasya manasi sisruksha jata. Sisruksha means a desire, urge to create, to expand this world. Antakarnasya sambandhi vasana viseshena mayayam viline antakarane sarva prani antakaraneshu samavedam bhavinaha prapanchasya bijabhudam atite kalpe pranibhikritam. So, what is kalpa? Kalpa is one long cycle involving creation, existence, dissolution. All these form one kalpa. We are going through one kalpa. And when the universe ceases to be what it is now, this kalpa will come to an end. So what it says is, so this thought came to Creator's God's mind, the Lord's mind. Parameshwarasya manasi means in the mind of the Supreme Lord. That's the meaning here. This is Sayana, not Rigvedic poet, Rigvedic Rishi. Sayana says this. He's trying to explain in a language that we can somehow understand. And then how did he create these other living beings? So he says, all these living beings have done a lot of good karmas and bad karmas in their previous kalpa, previous cycle. Sarva prani antakarneshu samavedam bhavinaha pravanjacha bijabhudam. So these actions, they leave behind certain samskaras, tendencies, impressions. And they remain in seed form during the long interval between one kalpa and another kalpa. When the new kalpa emerges, these seeds begin to sprout. Suppose you have got lots of seeds of different plants, different maybe fruit plants, flower plants in a field which is fertile. Suddenly, you don't see anything now. For a long time there was no rain. Because one day it rains, then what happens? All these seeds will sprout. Then only we understand, oh, so many seeds were lying in the ground which were invisible during the time when there was no rain. When the rain comes, suddenly these trees and fruit plants all will emerge. Like that, the bija Buddha in the form of seed, these samskaras and tendencies remain in subtle form in the minds of all the living beings that disappeared in the previous cycle, previous kalpa. When the new kalpa comes, they are reborn. That's why sometimes we feel in our life certain strong tendencies, maybe good tendencies, bad tendencies, which if you inquire into the mystery of these tendencies, we won't find an explanation for those tendencies. But we feel at home when we are in the world of those tendencies and impressions. They are so natural and spontaneous and effortless, how they influence us, our thoughts and emotions and feelings. So these tendencies may be coming from previous life cycles, previous kalpa. A kalpa can involve an innumerable number of life cycles. So when a new situation emerges, it's like it starts raining, all the seeds suddenly begin sprouting. And we can see there is a flower plant, there is a fruit plant because there was seed within. So this is how this creation continues in continuing cycles, like a wheel, this cyclic wheel. And the Nasadeeya Suktam ends with the question, who knows this mystery? Nobody knows. It is not some kind of an agnosticism. It only tells you the fundamental truth that there is a deep mystery, and we cannot really explain this in terms of is or is not, sat or asat. It is indescribable. The indescribable mystery of life and existence is indicated in the last two verses that we will take up in the next session. Thank you. We can have interaction. You are most welcome. Yeah.
You're up.
Hello, Swami.
Yeah. Most welcome, please.
I had a question. When it uses the word tamas or tama, is that the same as the tama from Shankhya?
Tama from?
From Shankhya, tamas, rajas, and sattva?
No.
Is that the same word there?
No, it's a much more profound concept. Sankhya is different. This is much more profound. Here, tama indicates a state when things did not manifest. So the absence of anything that is manifest is indicated by the word darkness. In the means absence of anything that is visible, in that sense. So, and I want to tell you in this context, philosophical terms in Sanskrit uh, vary in their meaning and implications from one system of philosophy to another system of philosophy. The same word may not mean the same thing in all the systems of philosophy. The word Prakriti has got one meaning in Vedanta, a different meaning in Sankhya. Purusha has got one meaning in Vedanta, an entirely different meaning in Sankhya. So, in Indian philosophical systems, there is called Samantara Siddhanta, means certain terms may be common in certain systems of philosophy, but certain systems may be totally different from another system of philosophy. So, that's the implication. And again, you have to remember, it has something to do with this difference in meaning, has something to do with the Vedic language. In Vedic language, in Vedic grammar, which is a kind of irregular grammar, as I mentioned this earlier, one of the early statements comes in the Nikhandu and Niruktam. That is, Niruktam is an attempt to try to explain the meanings of some of the Vedic sabdas, Vedic terms. Niruktam, 9th century BC. There's a commentary to Niruktam, it's called Durgacharya's commentary. Durgacharya was a great writer. So he says, in trying to explain this paradox of using different words to mean different things, and again using both affirmative and negative in one context, it can be puzzling. But it need not be puzzling if you understand the apophatic theology of Meister Eckhart, the negative theology of Meister Eckhart, because the one maybe stand as an exception in the galaxy, in the lineage of Christian theologians who introduced this. Anyway, there's a gap of almost 500 years between Shankaracharya in 8th century and Eckhart in 13th century. But still you find many of the ideas are very similar. Anyway, the point is this: Sarvesham Shabdanam Dhadujatum Dhadunam Anegarthatvam cha. It's an important, like a slogan, like an axiom in Vedic grammar. Means every word emerges from a root, and these roots and words can have different meanings in different contexts, and when used by different people with different purposes. So it's so the vast irregularity and the flexibility in the usage of Sanskrit grammar. So prakarana vaividyat pravaktuk vaividya cha aneghartatva means depending upon where it is used and who uses that, the words may have different meaning. That's why the early Indologists who became acquainted with Vedic literature, they were puzzled. But it took long time for them to make out this mystery, because so this language is very, very irregular, very irregular. So that's why one should try to understand the meaning from a traditional interpreter first. I mean, what is his received meaning? Then if you want to differ, you can differ. But before we differ, we have to understand the received interpretation and meaning of the particular term. That's very important. Thank you for the question. Very relevant question, actually. Yeah. Okay.
You're next, Mr. Gopinath.
Swamiji, is there any hint in the Suktam as to why they visualize this as a cyclical process? Because elsewhere in Upanishads, sometimes it's looked upon as having no beginning and no end. So it's an eternal process. But here they think of it as cyclical. So is there any hint why they think it is cyclical?
Yeah, this maybe the whole concept of cyclicism in Indian philosophy may have started with Rigveda Samhita. It is the oldest document in Indian philosophy and Indian culture. So in Rigveda Samhita you find many such ideas which later came to Vedanta also. So if you are trying to explain this world, then the Upanishads also tell you it is cyclic. Human life also cyclic. See our karmas, vasanas, samskaras, according they are deposited in our karmashaya. Some of them will manifest in this life, some of them will not manifest in this life. So those which do not manifest in this life are called the karmashaya samskaras, means the repository of accumulated samskaras. They may emerge any time in our future life. So cyclicism of this type is common in Veda, Patanjali Yoga Sutra, Vedanta, everywhere. In its crude, maybe most poetic expression you find in Nasadeeya Sutta. That's why the very crudeness of this language is the force of this poetical work. When in simple, crude language, a great idea is presented, it becomes more powerful. When you use very sophisticated, refined language, in very elaborate, it is understandable but is weak. But a great idea, a deep metaphysical idea, is expressed in simple, crude language, it becomes very powerful. That's the idea behind. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Swami.
Yeah. This is the beginning of everything that later we find in Upanishads. Thank you.
Go ahead, Shay. You're next.
Yeah, please, most welcome.
Namaskar. So as I'm reading this, and it's describing like this state, which is before any dualities, and it's before kama, it's before desire. And to me, when I read that, it sounds similar to in meditation, we must move to a state that's beyond desire and it's beyond dualities. And you've described this a bit before, that some of these Rigvedic mantra are like almost a description of a meditative experience. Could that be what we're reading here? More so than a literal description of creation, it's sort of like the Rishi's state of samadhi that he's trying to put into a poem.
Yeah, of course, I couldn't fully understand the essence of your question. Could you repeat once more the question so that I can address this question?
I'm wondering if like this state at the beginning, the state that's before all of this creation, whether it's almost like a culmination of a meditative experience, right? Like in meditation, you move beyond day and night and you move beyond desire. And that's kind of the description of the world at the beginning here, that it's, there's no day, there's no dualities, there's no desire. And that to me, it seems like maybe this is the Rishi's in meditation, and the Rishi goes beyond death and immortality, and that's what they're describing here.
Yeah. Okay. Now, when a Rishi meditates, when he contemplates, he's on ascent. So during this ascent, he may reach different levels of concepts and meditative experiences. At one stage, he is wondering, what's the nature of this creation? Who understands it? From where did it emerge? What is the mystery? So what was there at the beginning of everything? From where all this emerged? So these thoughts suddenly came to him, and those thoughts took the form of this outpouring of this mystical work. That's what we can see. In the Vedic literature, you find many. There are many statements. See, for example, Gange Yamune Seva. You can many such. There are names of rivers are mentioned. The names of oceans are mentioned. Names of and also the cowherds taking cows in the morning for grazing and returning in the evening. But in the evening, all the cows come back to the one stable. Like that, all thoughts, all ideas finally meet and one supreme point of meditative experience. All that you find in the Rigveda Samhita. It's a huge work, more than 10,000 verses, spread over 10 mandalas, and so you have to remember. So, but this particular poem became famous because it itself is called the creation of the hymn of the hymn of creation. That is the creation hymn. That's how it is translated into various languages. Srishti Geetam it's called, means the song of creation. So these thoughts emerged in the mind, deep in the mind of the sages, as he ascended from one stage to another stage in his contemplative journey. Okay, that's the idea.
Maharaj, there is a quite interesting question on YouTube.
Yeah. Okay.
You mentioned that it was God's desire, the creation.
Yeah.
There was a seed born in the mind of God
Yeah.
to manifest this universe.
Yeah.
So the question is, a person asks, I understand God has no desires. So, or was this seed, the real question is, was the seed the residual karmas of the previous kalpas? So the desire to manifest again, is that a residual karma from the previous kalpas?
Yeah.
That's the question.
Okay. You know, that's true. If you say that God created this world because He wanted to create this world, then you are imposing a desire on God. And if you say that God has a desire, it means He's imperfect or incomplete. He has something to be filled. That He is short of something. That he wants something, so He wants to create this world. Okay. If you say that God did not create this world, it has nothing to do with this, then you have to accept this world as a separate entity, separate from God Himself. So the poet wants to tell you that this world as such is not absolutely real, but not absolutely unreal, but it is not unconnected. It is not detached from the supreme reality, but it is not a creation of by the supreme reality due to some want, some desire as we understand. That's why the word kamastada grey, the word kama is used here. So kama should be, normally it is interpreted as sankalpa. I explain. Sankalpa and desire are two different things. A sankalpa is an involuntary thought that comes to your mind, not because you want to do something. You want something, so you plan to do something. That is not sankalpa. But sankalpa is something that comes to your mind naturally during the process of contemplation, not because you are in need of it, but it comes to you. So the absence of a desire is indicated by this interpretation of kama as sankalpa. In some books, in some commentaries, they say out of, sisriksha jata means love for creating. Not because he wanted that, an involuntary thought emerged in his mind. That is the meaning of kama. Kamastada grey. That should be understood. Otherwise, creationism will be logical. It is not creationism. So, but again, the world doesn't have an independent ontological existence. So, it emerges as a result of this sankalpa. Okay? Yeah.
David, go ahead.
Yeah. Please,
David?
Yes, Swami.
Yeah.
Swami, I'm still kind of wondering about this with words and concepts. You've expressed essentially the concept of Maya and of Brahman. So are these, number one, are the words, is either the word Maya or Brahman contained in this hymn? And whether it is or not, are those concepts pretty well expressed here of Maya and Brahman? Are they? It's hard for me to tell from reading it, but are they clearly expressed here or vaguely?
Yeah. In fact, this the word Maya doesn't occur in that sense here, but it's an interpretation coming from Sayanacharya. Sayana himself was a Advaita, non-dualist. So even now the most dependable, the most reliable and the most important commentary by Sayanacharya. So when I read this to be true to the text, the foundational text of Indian philosophy, Sayana's commentary, whenever you take a Vedas, without Sayana, it is not foundational. You are not authentic. So unless you bring in Sayana, no description of Vedic mantras will be authentic. Many modern authors, they have written mostly borrowing from Sayana or other commentators, like Mahidhara, Bhattavaskara. Many other Vedic commentators are there, but they didn't write commentaries the entire Vedic literature, like Sayana. So Sayana, who lived in 13th, 14th century, is considered to be very, very authentic and most important. Yeah.
Is the word Brahman contained in this? Or that also is not?
Not here, but let's say sometimes Vedic mantras, they indicate without naming. So that's why this poem is so great. If a poet tells you in so many words, he's a very inferior poet. A poet becomes a great poet when he doesn't say anything in words, but after reading, you start thinking, and then in your thinking process, you catch the real implications that the poet actually meant. Then only he's a great poet. Modern poets write something in prose sentences because they don't know the subtle art of saying without saying. You see?
Yes.
Ultra-modern poetry was then prose actually. So that's the power of the language. Again, so in fact the relative crudeness of the language is a very primitive language, Rigveda Samhita, and the profoundness of ideas. All combined, it makes a very unique piece of profound poetry. That's the idea behind it. So he puts all this idea into your head, and finally this is where you reach. That's why he's a great poet. Okay, I hope you agree with me. This is my estimate of great poets. What do you say?
Yes, right. I think that's true. If you say it, if you want to be a good poet, you have to say it sort of in language that's difficult to understand almost.
If you read a great poem, then you start your own intellectual journey and reach where the poet actually wanted you to reach. But inferior poets don't know. So they tell you what he wants to tell in so many words. And those poems are not worth reading, So okay, that's the idea. That's the power of this Rigveda Samhita. That's what actually caught the attention of the great linguist. The discovery of Rigveda by European Indologists brought a revolution in modern comparative philology. This is an important thing. Discovery of Rigveda Samhita brought no less than the discovery of Panini's grammar, brought a total revolution. The whole concept of language teaching, language learning, philology and Indology. In fact, that journey still continues, the exploration. A man like Max Muller, who did not have a very noble motive when he began, later he never looked back. Practically lived in the world of Rigveda only, nothing else. So that could happen only when this poetry contains something absolutely profound and inspiring, truly inspiring. Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Ranjit. Your question.
Yeah.
Namaste, Swamiji. You said that the creation is a kind of emerges from an involuntary thought. And elsewhere, we've also heard that it's also creation is Leela. The word Leela is used. So are they related with each other?
Yeah, actually, all involuntary thoughts have something of a sport in it. Because sport is something that you do not with a definite, clear purpose. You do it more as an effortless, involuntary act, a hobby. So it doesn't have a definite purpose or preparation. It's a spontaneous, involuntary thought process in the context of Rigveda Samhita. In the context of sport, you feel like going and playing. You don't plan early. So that's important. It's not like going every day for a specific kind of hobby. That's different. That becomes mechanical. There is no joy in it. Actually, when you do something in an involuntary manner, it's called sankalpa, then only there is something profound about it. You can imagine, I mentioned this earlier, all great poetical works, literary masterpieces, great music, all emerged as a kind of involuntary outpouring of the soul of the poet or the painter. And to give one classic example, Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda's Chicago address. It takes, I think, maybe if a student, in fact, participating in an elocution competition, repeating Vivekananda's lecture, may complete the whole thing within about 6 minutes. Now, this 6 minutes lecture is the most important and most profound lecture that Parliament of World Religion 1893 ever heard. Even in the context of Swami Vivekananda, who spoke for longer time, he himself gave very long discourses in India and also abroad. But nothing approaches the first Chicago address in terms of its force and power and of inspiration. That's because there was something behind. And if you look at the whole thing, Vivekananda was asked to come and start his speech. He was very shy. The huge assembly of learned Christian theologians and others, professors of theology, come from all over the world. He felt very shy and very, a bit disturbed. But he kept postponing his talk. Finally, he couldn't any longer postpone, and he gave this lecture. And Swamiji says, before he actually started, he prayed to the goddess Saraswati, goddess of learning, and then only he started this. So what happened, it has something in it. Suppose Vivekananda had prepared this long talk for many days, this would not have got this. So it is an involuntary sankalpa. So that applies to all great achievements of the human intellect or human emotions, whether poetry or music or painting or anything like that. Because you have to put your whole soul into it, and it should be involuntary. The total effortlessness is the sign of mastery of anything. If you are a true master, you'll be able to do it with total effortlessness. That's an idea behind. Okay, thank you.
But there is one question on any book on Sayanacharya's interpretation in English that you would recommend?
I mentioned this earlier. I don't know if Sayana's commentary is ever translated in English. I have no idea. Maybe translated into some other Indian vernacular, but I don't know if it is translated in English. Perhaps, I don't think it's a huge work. I don't think it is translated to the best of my knowledge. Okay, thank you. So,
there's no more question. I have one question.
Thank you.
Now, you introduced the concept of God more in this, unlike in Upanishads, we have been hearing mostly about Parabrahma in all Tattwamasi, Aham Brahmasmi.
Yeah.
But how is that? I'm trying to reconcile the concept of God you brought in this Suktam.
That's you have to understand, Rigveda Samhita is the beginning. Many of the mantras of Rigveda Samhita are also found in Upanishads, other Upanishads. But the point is, Rigveda Samhita is the primary, the foundational text of everything in Indian thought, Indian philosophy. So it is not in its complete form. The highest Advaita philosophy is emerging and had not reached the highest level of is perfection in Rigveda Samhita. It is Samhita only. What is Samhita? Samhita is a collection of prayers addressed to different deities. That's what Samhita is. The whole Rigveda Samhita is full of prayers addressed to different deities like Indra, Varuna, Agni, and so on. So, among these hymns, it's called hymn, Suktam. Suktam contains many verses. Among them, there are some magnificent pieces of very highly profound contemplative poetry. That's why Rigveda Samhita is the mother of everything. It's the beginning of everything. Okay, thank you for the question, and we will continue the discussion. We may conclude this in the next session. Thank you, especially for those who ask questions. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Recording stopped.
Thank you. Namaskar.